What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about the best summer showcases and camps that you can send your kids to if you're trying to get seen and move on to the next level in ice hockey.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the stress.
All right, so are we going to talk about showcases and camps that you can send your kid to over the summer? Absolutely the not. If you've stumbled upon this channel thinking that you found a video that was going to help you lay out your summer, to get your kids seen by various coaches in the sport of ice hockey, I've got bad news for you. But I'd like you to stick around and actually listen to what I'm about to tell you, because I'm going to let you know the facts when it comes to how detrimental these summer camps and showcases and structured play can be for your kid. All right, now before we dive into all of this, I want to get one thing out of the way. There is one camp over the summer. I guess you could say there's a series of camps over the summers that can actually get your kid in front of people that they need to be in front of and help develop them in some great ways, and that is the USA Hockey Player Development Camps. Up in Canada, I'm sure they've got something similar, but here in the United States, if you get selected to go from your state through your district into the national camps, those are absolutely worth it. And that's not me being biased because I work for them. That is me saying that you should see the amount of coaches and organizations that show up at these things. Some of the best kids, or not some of, all of the best kids for the most part in the entirety of the country, all playing against each other for about 10 days. That is a camp that I would absolutely say break your back to make sure your kid gets there, because it's going to be huge for them, from the play and the various coaches that are going to see them to the educational components that we have for them, right? Last year when I was working the 17s Dev Camp, we gave this really big presentation on training, and hopefully got a lot of these kids understanding a little bit better what their training needs to look like. I understand they're 17 years old. A lot of them know a lot better, but some of them, it may stick with some of them, and those educational opportunities aren't limited to just strength and conditioning. They go on to nutrition. They go on to sports psych, all these various topics that are going to be great information for these kids. So in addition to, you could say developing, I don't know how much development happens over the course of 9 to 10 days, but there's some development, there's some educational components, and they will quite literally be seen by some amazing organizations and programs. That is one camp that I would say do everything you can to make sure you make those camps, especially if you're moving on to the next level each time, and make the national development or national player development camps at the 17, 16, and 15U for the girls. I think it starts at 15, 16, 17. They may go up to 19. I know the festival at the end of the summer goes all the way to 22. But those are camps that I would say make sure you do, and those are during the summer. So just a little caveat here. That is an important one. But today we're going to be talking about all of the other camps that are absolute dumpster fire and a waste of your money. All right, now with that out of the way, we can kind of get into the meat of this, and that is the insanity that is summer showcases and spring showcases for hockey. I don't know how it works in other states, but for the most part in Florida, these kids have to be prepared to be on the ice for about 10 months out of the year. Tournaments or preseason tournaments, I guess, for your regular season would start at some point in August. So you are practicing in August. A lot of these teams also practice over the summer, which is insanity and beyond stupid, especially at the 8, 10, and 12U, even 14U levels. But the actual season will start early September, late October, late August. So from August until when we have tryouts, which is mid-May, you have to be ready to play hockey, right? So season will go August, September, October, November, December, January, February. State tournaments usually in March, then districts and natties go through April, and then boom, we have tryouts in May, so there's really no time to take off. Now, after tryouts, hopefully you've made a team and you're able to kind of dedicate yourself to getting prepared for the next season and getting as far away from the ice as humanly possible, at least for a little while. So for 10 months out of the year, you have to be ready to play hockey. That means conditioned. Conditioning is really the biggest part of it, because everything else is going to go to shit when you start focusing on that. But to extend that out for another couple months because you think that you're going to be able to be seen is just insane thinking and stupid thinking, and it's not your fault as a parent or a player. You've been lied to in an effort to grab a bunch of your money. That's the whole purpose of these. I'm in these Facebook groups, and parents consistently ask, is this a money grab? Is this showcase a money grab? Is this tryout a money grab? And the answer is always yes, they are all money grabs. Anywhere from 0 to 5% of those kids are going to end up getting seen from some of these quote-unquote ID and pre-draft camps. Most kids aren't going to get anything out of it outside of ice time, which you could get for a fraction of the cost back at home, right? So understanding that these camps and showcases, for the most part, not all of them, right? So if you've got like a main camp for a junior team or something to that effect, absolutely, like spend your money, go do that. But this team from, I don't know, the Massachusetts that contacted you for your single A player to play on their triple A tournament team over the summer, understand that that's a total money grab. It's not triple A. If your kid was a triple A player, you'd be playing triple A, not during the spring and summer. It's not developmental because, right, you're going to be playing. You're not practicing with this team from Massachusetts unless you're flying up every week, which would be another insane spend of your time, money, and effort. But you're going to be playing games. And here's the kicker. Hockey Canada did a study. I remember reading about it back in like 2021, where they found that it takes roughly 11 games to equate to the same amount of development that happens in one properly run practice, right? So if you're talking about playing on these showcase and tournament teams where you may get 3, 4, 5 games in a weekend here, to the tune of $3,000 to $5,000 all in with travel and or you've already got equipment, but like jerseys and apparel and things like that to play for this team. Let's say 2,000 to 3,000, 3,000 to 5,000 seems pretty extreme. 2,000 to 3,000 all in every time you do it. You may be out in the neighborhood of $5,000 to, let's call it $10,000, depending on how much ice time you're getting, before you get what you could have got from one practice or skill session with a coach back at home, right? So if you're thinking that this development is going to happen, understand that it's not going to happen. There is, again, I'll say it one more time just to reiterate it and drive it home. It takes, or Hockey Canada found that it takes roughly 11 games to equate to the development that happens in one well-run practice. Now that's puck touches, that's passes, situations, things like that. So if your thought process is my kid's going to develop more because they're playing more, take that out of your head because it absolutely doesn't exist. It's not real, and it will cost you to the tune of $5,000 to $10,000 to get that one practice worth of development from over the summer. Now, if you're using it as an excuse to go on vacations places, right, and you're using it as an excuse to get to spend some time with your family and your kid has fun, and this is not like make or break money for you, then sure, have at it, dude. If it's just throwaway play money and you were that well off, go ahead, right? But please don't think for a second that you're going to be developing your child because it just doesn't work that way. All right, so the next big point I want to cover is that your kid needs time away from the ice. If you go from the very beginning of the season all the way through tryouts, here in Florida at least, you're looking at about 10 months straight of having to be quote-unquote hockey ready, right? From the position that most coaches are going to see that, it's going to mean conditioned, right? So you're going to have to be conditioned for hockey over the course of 10 months, ready to go, play 100%. Now, the problem with that is that takes away from your ability to develop. So we're already kind of in a position where we're going to struggle to develop the way that we want to because the interference like phenomenon is pulling away from our ability to be able to get stronger and faster and all those things because we condition so much in youth sports, which is the dumbest thing. I'll link in the description to another episode that I did where we talked about this and why it's an absolute exercise in futility. But your development as an athlete is very much on the back burner for the entirety of that time, right? On top of that, you're skating. Hockey is a very weird sport where it's like a very different movement pattern from any other movement, right? So you've got lateral force vectors that are propelling you forward. Everything is even linear movement on the ice is lateral movement. So it's a movement skill that's very different and foreign and not necessarily great for your body. And we're starting to see this. These kids that have played year round are now starting to get up into the higher levels of hockey. So we're talking about, various pro teams and NCAA teams, major, junior, and we're starting to see more in the mid-20s, both hip and shoulder labral tears. Now, the shoulder is kind of like a byproduct of it's not a direct cause. It's really just not enough focus on postural development and things like that as a hockey player. But the hip labral tears are absolutely like an enormous issue. There's a study that was done, this was years ago, decades ago, where they looked at both skiers and hockey players at their hips, what do we call it? Femoral acetabular impingement, FAI, right? So FAI is something that can either be congenital or it can be something that you give yourself over time. And what it is where the femur inserts itself into the hip, right? It's called your acetabulum. It should, and if you're not watching, I'm kind of demoing what it should look like. It should kind of sit in there like this. Let's find, there we go. There should be some space. It should float, right? So this is your leg bone. This is your hip. It should kind of float in there. Over time, with hockey, skiing, we see it in tennis a lot. Any sport where you're kind of down in a athletic base or a hinge position for an extended period of time, you're not upright. Sports like football and baseball, you're in a much more upright position most of the time. But hockey, anytime you're on the ice, you're in that athletic base, you're hinged, your hip flexors are shortened, and this causes lower cross syndrome and some other things, but it can cause FAI. So as these kids got older, the study showed that if they didn't have femoral acetabular impingement when they were like 8, 9, 10, they absolutely did have it by the time they were 16, 17, 18, 19, right? And what that does is that takes what should be this and turns it into this. So now you get a little bit of grinding every time you go to produce any force into the ground, especially skating, squatting, jumping, landing, all that stuff. And you're more prone to labral tears. Now, labral tear is an awful thing because it's like a 9 to 12 month recovery front to back. If we're talking about being in game shape and hockey shape, at the end of it, it's probably going to take you a year to get back there, much like an ACL tear. Just because the trauma of the surgery is so big, it's going to take forever to get back. And we're starting to see these kids who never took any time off develop this FAI, which is going to, it's going to create some issues at the knee and the ankle, but it's really going to it's going to lead to a higher likelihood that you do end up with a labral tear because you do have that grinding. And if you're grinding in a bad spot at the wrong time, when you go to put a lot of force in the ground, it could just tear. And that's an awful thing to have happen. We don't want that. Now, I'm not saying if your kid plays year round that will absolutely happen to them, but you are putting that like behind the 8 ball when it comes to making sure that they're going to have longevity in the sport because they will inevitably end up with these issues. Mentally, they need time away from the sport too, especially the structured play. If you want to go out and have like a power skating coach over the summer, go out there like once a week, once every other week, or you want a skills coach who's going to work on legitimate just skills and not conditioning or any of that other stuff, that's not a bad thing, right? You're still in your youth. You are trying to develop a skill set, not necessarily just hone a skill set, and that has to be worked on, right? But this structured play where we're playing games is absolutely going to lead to a higher incidence of injuries. In addition to that, you cannot, and I'll tell you as a coach, I'll get these kids that do these showcases and I'll talk to the parents and say, he's got to be fresh here, he's got to be fresh here, and he's got to be fresh here. All right, so we get like a week and a half of training and then we got to peel back, which we shouldn't have to. Even during season, you really shouldn't have to peel back much from a development standpoint. We had to peel back because this kid's got to be ready to perform on the off chance that he's one of the 0 to 5% kids that get seen at this nonsense showcase, right? And then they come back. It takes, let's say, 2 to 3 sessions to get them back where they need to be, right? From a mobility standpoint, from a work capacity in the gym standpoint, because they've been gone for a week at this point. Now I get another week before I got to taper down. They got to go off. I miss them for a week, and then they come back, and we lose a week to reclaiming good positions and all that. And then I get a week of training, and then they're off again. You see the cycle. It makes it very hard to develop as an athlete during a time that should have the most accelerated gains, because we can afford to place heavier stimulus on these athletes. So if you are thinking that your kid's going to get seen and it's worth it to put like strength and speed and mobility and all that stuff on the back burner, it's not. And I mentioned earlier, the mental and emotional aspect of it, dude, your kid's got to get away from the game. There's a lot of pressure. I've talked about this in previous episodes. Like, structured play is killing kids because it forces like compliance to a system and like kills creativity, right? Because if I'm playing and I mess up, right, I've now kind of screwed all my teammates, and I lose the puck coming over the blue line. Now they're going the other way. I am boxed into having to do things a specific way, right? And we don't have the practices with these summer teams usually to be able to try to be creative, right? So you're doing it in games and you're puckered up. You're not going to be able to be creative and grow from that perspective, because the way that we do get better as an athlete is to fail and then learn lessons. As long as we don't fail at the same thing over and over and over again, failure is a great thing. But we don't do that in games because we don't want to lose ice time or have the team hate us because we cost them a goal, or have to take a penalty because I got out of position, I lost the puck, and now I got to hook this guy or he's got a breakaway, right? So the structured play stifles creativity, right? Year-round structured play stifles creativity. Actually, this happens all year, but we're focusing on the off season right now. It stifles creativity. It leads to a higher likelihood that your kid's going to get injured, and it's really, really damaging from an emotional perspective because they don't get that break from the sport. If you talk to these guys who play in the NHL and they would take the summers off, you'll know that by the time they got to the end of the summer, these kids were rearing to go. But when they go to practice 3 days a week, year round, it just becomes part of the routine. And it's just that's not necessarily a good thing long term when it comes to love of the sport, because man, it was 70% of kids will quit sports or competitive sports or a competitive sport by the time they're 13 years old, right? It's because there's too much pressure and it's not fun anymore. You got to make this fun for the kids, especially if they're, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15 in a lot of respects. All right, so I think that's going to do it for today. Hopefully you learned a couple things. Remember, these summer showcases are bad news because they're going to cost you money, right? Money you don't need to spend. For example, 10 grand. What could 10 grand do for you? That's like the way high end. Let's say $5,000, $6,000 over the course of a summer doing these camps and showcases. What could you do with that money that would be significantly better for your child, right? It could be, you could be in one of my groups for 3 years for that kind of cash, right? You could pay a skills coach the better part of 50 sessions. You could take that money and put it into a college savings account for your child, where maybe they don't have to take out loans when it comes time to play college or go to college, because they're more than likely 93% of kids won't play a game or have a practice past high school, so that there'd be some money there, because they're more than likely not going to get scholarships for playing. And if they do end up on an NCAA roster, the odds of them getting a full ride are almost non-existent. So having some money in a college account might be a good thing. You could also take that time and allow your kid to be a kid. I know as parents, you want your kids like busy and doing something, and sports are a great way to kind of combat that. Or not combat that, or kind of ensure that they're not out doing stupid things like getting high with their friends, or, doing the typical 15, 16, 17-year-old shenanigans. But allow your kid to be a kid. Like, allow them to figure out what to do with downtime. Allow them to learn a new skill, learn a new sport. Allow them to, I hesitate to say play another sport in the off season, because the off season's not long enough anymore. And the rare instances where it does exist, it's not long enough to play another sport. But you should be developing athletically. That's a big thing. And I harp on this a lot. And a lot of it's because I'm in this field. But if you wait until your kid is 15, 16, 17 to start training in the gym, it is almost too late to get the things out of them that you need, because they're going to be so far behind the 8 ball. It's going to make it next to impossible to get to where they need to go. One thing I didn't really kind of touch on, if your kid is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, even 14, and possibly 15, dude, this summer showcase camp, whatever circuit that these guys are on, is an absolute waste of time, money, and effort. And the worst thing that could happen is your kid gets hurt during this time when they didn't need to, and now they can't play in the regular season. And the best possible thing that could happen is like they have a good time. They're not going to develop. The data shows that there is no development during this time because there's not enough puck touches and situations and things like that. They're not going to develop because they're not going to have the option to be creative because they don't want to screw up and let their team down, right? And you're going to be out a bunch of money and time. Your kid loses a childhood. And I know you're sitting there saying they love it. They love it. They can love it. My daughter, I'm sure if I allowed, she's only 2 now, but if I allowed her to eat cupcakes for dinner every night, she would love it, right? But that doesn't mean it's good for her. And it definitely isn't good for her long term or even in the short term. So peel back. If you clicked on this hoping that you would see me lay out some of the best showcases and camps, I'm sorry. I needed a hook to get you sucked in because a lot of parents don't want to hear this. A lot of athletes don't want to hear this either. They just want to play. But spend the summer being a kid. Spend the summer getting stronger and faster. That should be a year-round venture, but the summer's a really accelerated time for that kind of thing. Continue on your skill set, like hire a skating coach, hire a skills coach. That's fine. That's not going to really hurt you long term. But you got to get away from the structured play because it's stifling your creativity, your growth, your development, all of that. So save your money. Don't do these things. It is absolutely not worth it. And then I will, because we do, every time I upload this, we get like a little influx of book sales. So this one's probably the best one for you to grab if you're watching this video, Total Hockey Training. It's written by me. It's over 250 pages of information on how you should train to be a hockey player. If you're a coach or a player or a parent, it's a great buy. We have the dynamic effort method for athletes. If you're a coach, there it is. If you're a coach, this is a great book to kind of teach you how to both make your athletes fast and get them to have like speed endurance. That's a big thing that gets overlooked when it comes to youth athletic development. The speed endurance thing isn't a thing. It just endurance is, but the ways that we try to increase speed endurance, they're not the way to do it. Man, I think that's it. Hopefully we're going to have some good news for you guys in the coming days. I've sat down with the new facility. I think everything's going to be a go. I hope we're able to go next week. If you are somebody who trains with me, you will have the opportunity to do so very soon. I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. A better situation than I was in before over at the Lions Den. Sad to see it go, but I'm happy to see what this is going to be able to do for my family. And I think that's it. Hope everybody had a good time. Sorry I lied to you to get you to watch this. Hopefully you did watch it and you learned something. And we'll see you next time.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the struggle.